was one of those mathy, sciencey nerds that never quite got why I had to go and have lunch with people and talk about football over lunch. So I'm pretty excited about what's happening in media buying personally. Okay, so I think, and these guys set the stage for me beautifully. I love this sort of man versus machine question. I think we came to the conclusion, the somewhat obvious conclusion, that it's actually about man and machine. It's not one or the other. It's this beautiful combination of both that's really creating opportunity. I think the challenge, though, is that it's hard for people to change. You know, it's our human nature to be afraid, I think, of change. And I think that's where it gets sort of challenging for everybody in this industry, because for this to be as successful as it can be, for everybody in this ecosystem, for publishers, for planners and buyers, for marketers, for data sellers, it has to be more than just this evolution, this sort of step-by-step evolution. It really has to be a revolution. We're talking about some revolutionary changes that need to happen. So I want to talk about that for a minute. So I can say, again, from personal experience, that as a digital media buyer, I started my career at a little agency called Avenue A back in 2000. It's now known as Razorfish. It's part of the Publicis family, but I was this digital media planner that fell into it at age 23, as many of us did in 2000. I was the first media planner in New York to actually put a plan into the Atlas ad serving system. I'm fairly old school as far as digital media planners and buyers go. And I've experienced a lot of these changes that have happened over the last 10 or 15 years. You know, in the mid or late 1990s, it was relatively simple. I think we thought we were really exciting and cutting edge, but we had a small handful of sites that we could choose from. Everything was incredibly manual. I remember entering things into Excel and actually emailing them to folks. And that was manual negotiation over the phone. That was manual management of my programs in Excel, manual optimization, and very manual reporting. It was very much a human kind of process from start to finish. And really, we used content as our proxy for audience, which I know everybody in this room is familiar with, this concept that content has always been the way that we have connected with audiences, and now we are able to free ourselves from relying entirely on content as that proxy for audience. Well, in those old days, that was what we knew, and so that's what we did. Fast forward to the early 2000s, when I went through the IPO of Avenue A, and our stock went to $89, subsequently went to 75 cents, as I'm sure many of you experienced along with me. But things got a lot more complicated. I mean, I had thousands of sites to choose from. I still was dealing with these very manual processes as a media buyer. Everything was still about entering it into Excel, negotiating over the phone. As I said, lunches where we talked about things I didn't care about, like football. Just as an example, another big example that is reality television. I don't know why, but salespeople and planners love to talk about reality television at lunch, and I was always lost. I never had cable. So it wasn't really my world. But what started happening is you had this explosion of ad networks that in some ways really seemed to make our lives more simple. We could buy things in packages. It was cheaper. We got access to reach in much more seemingly efficient ways. I shouldn't say seemingly, definitely, in much more efficient ways. And it was really cool. It made our jobs easier and our lives easier. We were still using content as a proxy for audience, but Drive PM, which actually was born out of Avenue A, which is, again, my parent agency, invented this thing called remarketing, and it was a sign, I think, of a major changing tide. We can actually target people that have visited your website. We're like, oh my God, that is just genius. That is totally amazing. And it's interesting because I think it was really a sign of things to come. So if you fast forward to the mid-2000s or so, I mean, it was just a mess. There were millions of sites to choose from, arguably billions of sites to choose from. We were starting to rely pretty heavily at that point. You know, if you were running any kind of direct response campaign or even any kind of broad-based brand campaign, you were dealing with a lot of increasingly undifferentiated ad networks because you were desperate for reach and efficiency. You had clients that had big budgets. They wanted you to spend them. You were sort of grasping at straws. You had ad networks calling you every day. It wasn't clear what the differences were, especially when Network A and Network B both said that they had 100,000 sites in their network. I mean, it just was kind of a mess. And it was frustrating because there was a general lack of visibility and really, frankly, a general lack of insight. And I would say that that was frustrating to buyers Certainly it was frustrating to our clients. I'll say from a personal experience, I had Capital One as a client at that point. I was supervisor at Razorfish. I was overseeing all of their display advertising. And man, those guys are tough. I bet half of you in this room have worked with Capital One in one capacity or another. They're an incredibly demanding and tough client. What I will say about them is that they're very savvy about data. They're very data-centric. They're very data-oriented, and they pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. And for insight, they didn't understand why I couldn't tell them what was happening with their programs. And this was the reality, unfortunately, of working with networks. There were good things about networks, as I said. We got great reach, we got good efficiency. There were challenges too. One of them was just a general lack of transparency and insight. And in the meantime, you had this explosion of audience targeting opportunities that was starting to happen, right? Early days was Dakota, Yahoo, Revenue Science, which is now Audience Science, this great thing called behavioral targeting, which we thought was like the greatest thing since sliced bread. So that was becoming more interesting. For me personally, I think my journey took a big left turn in 2007, and I have to give a lot of credit to guys like Ramsey McGrory, who at the time was at Right Media, and a guy named Joe Zawadzki, who some of you might know, who's the founder of Media Math, for really opening my eyes. PS Media Math at the time was like two guys. It was Eric Wasserman and Joe Zawadzki. Now they're fancy. They have 100 plus people, but at the time it was pretty small. But they were these guys that had this vision about changing the way that things were done and embracing the opportunity that ad exchanges like Right Media were creating. And what they made me realize as a buyer is that there were all these issues with the way that I was doing things that I don't think I even knew existed. So, you know, when you look at sort of the classic ad network model, and I'm sorry, but also not sorry that I'm completely picking on networks. I think, again, it's not an evolution, it's a revolution. There's a lot of change that needs to happen, so I'm just going to go with it. One was opaque pricing, right? There were undisclosed margins, so we didn't really know the difference between what was paid to a publisher and what was charged to a buyer. So we really didn't know as buyers what the real value was of that impression. I know there was talk about RTB and I think price discovery, Chris, was your comment. Just this ability to move beyond the black box of pricing was something that was very interesting to me. The media bundling question, right? So impressions were sold packaged in bundles of 1,000 impressions, CPM, cost per 1,000. And that limited our ability to pick and choose only the desired impressions. Again, we didn't know we were limited. We thought that was the best way that things could be done. But it became clear that things could be done in a better way. So lack of placement level transparency is another one. So we would get these site lists, and that was great. We knew which sites we were running on. But we actually had no idea if we were going to run at any given site, and we had no idea if we were going to get any sort of performance out of a specific site because we didn't really have site level reporting. And along with that was just a general lack of transparency into the actual optimization process, right? It was done by the network. And it was not something that was made transparent to us as the buyer. And so we really didn't have too much insight into what drove performance and why. Here's the challenge with all of this, right, is that, man, we didn't look very smart when our client was trying to ask us, well, what did you buy? What worked? What didn't work? And why? And I was like, well, I bought ad.com and value click and specific, and your CPA is $50, and I'm not sure why. I mean, that's really what it was like, and it was pretty painful. So when I started hearing about what was possible with ad exchanges and DSPs, to me, this light bulb went on over my head, and I thought, man, that's pretty cool, right? Price transparency, first of all, to me, that seemed like a good thing for both the buyer and the seller, right? This model where there would be a more clear one-to-one relationship from a pricing standpoint, from a relationship standpoint, from many standpoints, between buyer and seller. And the buyer would actually have an understanding of the price that they were paying for a given impression and how much of that was actually going to the publisher. Now, this is not a perfect system, but you guys, you know what I mean. I mean, there was so much more transparency that was possible. This idea of granularity, being able to cherry pick impressions, by the way, publishers hate that phrase, but buyers love it. Being able to cherry pick impressions to allow us to choose only those impressions that we actually thought were going to work for us, and actually to be able to de-average pricing based on expected return. So instead of paying $3 CPM for 1,000 impressions, you're actually able to say, impressions that look like this are worth 67 cents to me, Impressions that look like this are worth $25 to me. And that's a reality. I mean, that was what was so magical about it to me, is that it wasn't just about cheapness. It was about efficiency. It was about matching the right price to the impression at that given moment based on expected return. It wasn't about lowballing the publishers. It was about getting the impression for what I thought it was worth given what I was trying to accomplish. This idea of control, this is a huge one. Allowing a buyer to sit in the driver's seat and be able to make the buying decisions and pull the optimization levers. We never had that level of control before. That was something that search people knew how to do. That's not something that display people knew how to do or really had ever had the opportunity to do before. And finally, what does it all mean? Well, it really means more insight, right? More transparent buying optimization, reporting. All of this stuff became clearer to us, which meant deeper insights, so that you could actually go back to your client and say, well, this is what worked. This is why it worked. And hey, good news. Since I bought it in this way, I can actually buy it again next month. I don't have to just give $100,000 to a network or a publisher and not know what's going to happen. I can actually make repeatable decisions. So, you know, these are kind of buzzwords, I realize that, and I know I heard them on the last panel, but they're buzzwords, I think, for a reason, because they really are changing the way that media buyers can buy and media planners can plan. Unprecedented levels of transparency, right? Granularity, being able to choose each individual marble rather than taking the whole bag of marbles for a CPM of $3. Being in the driver's seat, having control over your programs. And living in this world of a constant kind of potential barrage of aha moments that you had never had before as a buyer. Now here's the thing, I said this already, I'll say it again. It felt an awful lot like what the search guys kind of always had, but we in display just didn't really have it. That's not how our worlds worked or our jobs really functioned. So, you know, it's messy, right? We know that buyers and sellers are trying to figure it all out. I created this once actually for a client because a client asked me to try and explain, you know, the Terry Kawaja chart. And this was my attempt to actually simplify it, and it's still a complete mess, right? You have clients dealing with agencies. You have agencies buying from publishers. You have agencies buying from supply-side platforms through exchanges. You have agencies working with trading desks. You have clients working with DSPs directly. You have data providers making data available in a million different ways, understandably. They want to make data as ubiquitously available as possible. It's just a mess of relationships that exists right now. Publishers are trying to monetize inventory. They're totally freaked out by this whole idea of the exchange model and real-time bidding. It's messy. And you still have ad networks that are not providing value, and you have some ad networks that really are providing value. There are a lot of players in the ecosystem trying to figure all of this out. So, you know, what does it all mean for a media buyer? I heard someone mention 3 martini lunch earlier, and you kind of can't. I know it's a cliche, but it is really true. I think the biggest challenge here, again, not an evolution or revolution, is that this model has a really strong legacy, right? Digital agencies like Razorfish, digital agencies like Digitas, you know, these are folks that grew up in a digital age, and the planners came into agencies that were already digital in their DNA. That is not what all buying agencies look like. There are lots of buying agencies that have very strong traditional slants in the way that they think about the world. And even agencies like Razorfish and Digitas, and I can only use those as examples because I know them, even those guys have planners that are used to doing things in very specific ways. And honestly, haggling on price, that was a huge part of our job. That's always been a huge part of our job. I'll tell you, my first boss, when I got hired at, well, it was called Eyeballs at the time, but Avenue A had just acquired it. When I got hired, Michael Cohen, he was one of the founders of this agency. I remember him like literally testing us on our negotiation skills early on and being really mean and tough and being a publisher on the phone and forcing me essentially to argue him down to the lowest price possible. And that's what I learned how to do. And that's what all buyers learned how to do, right? But I think it's clear, and I know these guys said it, so really I think maybe my role here is just to reinforce maybe what was already said and stick a Forrester logo on it, because I really do believe it, as does Forrester. You know, we're going from this world where buying clout, negotiation skills, relationships, and manual management really must be replaced. I heard all these words earlier, and I'm going to say them again. Data-driven decision-making. Data. Taking people with econometric backgrounds, which is Chris's background, math backgrounds, folks that have worked in model building, de-averaging pricing to make impression-level decisions, and automating management. I know Nate mentioned operational efficiencies. I am a huge believer in operational efficiency. And if for no other reason, this is a good reason to change, because the way that things are done are incredibly inefficient operationally, and there's so much room to use technology to do things in a more automated way, right? But it's a different kind of skill set. So I created this fake media plan, and I know that this is what media plans can look like because I used to make media plans like this. This is just to illustrate that change is painful and happens slowly. I guarantee you there are still a lot of media plans out there that look like this. You got 10 ad networks, all running on the media plan. They're all running run a network, optimizing to some pixel on the client's website. They're all getting about the same amount of money. Oh yeah, well it's 2011 and there's this new thing called a DSP. So I'm just going to throw that on the plan next to my 10 ad networks. I guarantee you that there are plans that look like this. This is a problem, right? I mean, we all know this is a problem. What does it mean? It means overlap. If you have 10 ad networks that all have 85 or 90% reach, guys, I mean, do the math, right? There's overlap there. So what does that actually mean? Ooh, total loss of things like frequency control, right? All of a sudden, you have 10 ad networks in your DSP, all with individual frequency caps in place. Your frequency cap of 3 a day becomes 30 a day or 33 a day. That's just a mess. Guarantee you response rates are going to suffer. So what does it really mean for this client? Bam. Everybody's least favorite word. Lots of waste on this program. Okay. I heard people talking about this on the panel earlier, and I was so excited to hear this. I think it was the one fellow who was representing the creatives on the panel, and I was so excited that he said this. He was talking about being brilliant at something, not just being pretty good. And he could not have set me up better because I 100% agree with him. I think that in the long term, media buyers really need to specialize. You can't just be pretty good at a bunch of different things. You have to be brilliant at one or two things. For any kind of direct response buying, and frankly, any kind of broad-based brand buying, anything that's not customized, I think you need to be a real specialist in programmatic buying. I think you need to know how to work in a platform. I think you need to be quantitatively savvy. You need to understand and be comfortable with data. And you can do things like use algorithms and human skills to be able to optimize to your goal, whether it's ROI or whether it's reach and frequency to a particular target. But you have to be able to bring those skills to the table. You have to be willing to log into a platform. I cannot even tell you. I'm doing a wave on DSPs right now, demand-side platforms, and a lot of them are still working with agencies and clients in a managed service capacity, which frankly is a little bit like a next-generation ad network, because media buyers aren't necessarily the types to log into a buying platform, right? Are those the people that you want managing your money in the long term? They might not be, right? I think that those planners need to make a decision. I think they need to learn these kinds of skills, or maybe they need to become custom buyers. Maybe they need to focus instead on really deep, rich publisher relationships, creating really cool, integrated, innovative, custom programs that you're not necessarily going to buy using an RTB mechanism, but rather you're going to be spending time with that publisher, being an expert in your client's brand, working with publishers that have salespeople that don't just sell ROS or RON, but are also experts in building really unique, creative, innovative, multi-channel, custom programs. All about non-standard, rich, immersive brand experiences, which frankly we know is a huge opportunity. We all want that money to come online. Let's give brands what they care about. I'm not saying these things should be so bifurcated that there's no overarching strategy, so that's my little asterisk. Oh yes, there has to be some strategic layer on top, duh, right? Okay, so my favorite 3 words right now are specialization, centralization, and data. I think that we're gonna live in a world where you have clients many of whom, I shouldn't say many, some of whom will actually develop this buying practice inside of their organizations. And I'll tell you what, those folks are calling Forrester and asking for advice right now on how to build out an internal trading desk. This is happening. I think that they're going to focus their energies, whether it's this internal trading desk or just clients in generally, at being much better in the use of data. I think that they all know that they're sitting on data assets, their first-party data assets, that they're not doing enough with. And they recognize that if they can harness the power of that first-party data and augment it with things like third-party data, they have a really powerful tool. And that requires centralization, because just like in media buying, if you have 15 independent data programs, there's probably some overlap, there's probably some waste in that system. So I envision a world where data management and audience management combine into a single unified platform, and clients get much more involved in that process of data management. And I bet a lot of them will actually go right to a centralized media buying platform to get access to not just display, but mobile, video, social, search, addressable TV, and that'll be done in a centralized way. Universal optimization, universal frequency control, universal audience targeting. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not a role for agency-like entities. I think there's actually a huge role. There are not that many clients that really have the capability to succeed doing this stuff themselves. I think that you'll see a pretty decent number of what I would call independent trading desk-like entities. There are little companies like Accordant Media, and it was actually spun out of, a guy from Razorfish spun this group out. And frankly, I would say a company like Adnetic that has this level of expertise that works with a broad base of clients to help them do this when they don't have the capability themselves. But when you're looking at quote-unquote traditional buying agencies, I think that there will be this bifurcation where you'll have programmatic buying experts and brand experience experts. And those brand experience experts are going to be involved in these direct publisher relationships. Okay, I know somebody said, oh, acronyms, booed acronyms. Here's the reality. The acronyms actually mean something, right? So you guys probably know all this stuff already. Your clients might not, frankly. And I talk to clients every day, and so I know that this is true. The best thing that clients can do is educate themselves on all of these acronyms, because they do actually have meaning, and I think they represent what the future is going to look like. And this final sort of parting thought, if you're a client and you don't know how your money is being spent, it's kind of your own damn fault to a certain degree, right? You need to get educated about what's happening with your money. If you understand those acronyms, if you understand the context around them and why it's important, you're going to be much better equipped to ask questions of the folks that are spending your money. And then you can make a decision, is my money being spent in the best way possible, or do I need to rethink the way that I do things? The end.
Joanna, anyone have any questions for Joanna?
Hi, Dan Mason, Vibrant Media. As an ad network, and specifically one which differentiates more on product than audience.
Okay.
I mean, the main question I have is actually just that we're not necessarily at the liberty of entering an exchange, with a differentiated offering, right? I mean, what we do is different enough that may not work.
Yep.
So, do you think the right way to go about it in terms of keeping clients comfortable is to offer them the exact same transparency metrics, or is there a better way to sort of prove that we're not just sort of fleecing them behind the scenes?
So, okay, let's see, two parts to that question, two parts that I want to answer to that. So, if you ask a buyer, do they want transparency? I can't think of a single buyer that'd be like, no, just keep your margin opaque, that's cool. That's great, I don't mind. Of course they want transparency. What you have to decide is, can I actually support that in my business? A lot of the DSPs have made the executive decision that they have to be transparent to be able to sell themselves as DSPs. That might not necessarily be the route that you want to go down, and that might be actually totally fine. In fact, some of the ways that some DSPs, and actually trading desks too, are working with clients are not with transparent margins, but with things like performance guarantees. I guarantee you I can hit your goal better than any third-party ad network, and I'll give you as much transparency as you want, but we're not really in the price transparency space. That said, what really matters in this world is being able to differentiate on either data access, so you have proprietary data that no one else has, media access or inventory access. So you have access to proprietary inventory that nobody else has. Could be like custom, unique opportunities from publishers that don't make it available otherwise, right? Or technology, proprietary technology that no one else has. So as long as you're able to differentiate on one or more of those things, I actually think that there's a place. I think the problem right now is there are a lot of undifferentiated players. Yeah.
New educational paths within the agency that are going to make that education possible?
Yeah.
For, I mean, is this a challenge for the agency structure to make sure that you're taking the math majors, the rocket scientists, the MIT grads, and you're actually putting them on a path where they understand the business they're in?
I think it's a monster challenge for agencies. I mean, I think reading between the lines, I think agencies are in a tough spot right now. I think that they know it, and I know that they are trying to aggressively evolve. The agency trading desk is an example of that. What's interesting is that I'm also starting to see agencies on the ground that are bypassing that centralized trading desk model and building out those skill sets themselves because they recognize that this is where things are going. So either one, they want to stay relevant, or two, they just passionately believe that this is the right thing to do. So you are starting to see kind of on-the-ground movement around this model in a more formal way. What I think agencies really need to do, though, is think long and hard about the kinds of people that they're hiring and the kinds of training that they're giving them. If it's all about negotiating on price, as I said, there's something that gets lost there.
Joanna O'Connell, thank you very
Thanks.
much.